Do not shed any tears, son. From now on, we will only shed the blood of our enemies. Welcome to my dojo. This is KungFuPizzaPrty, and I'm your host, Brandon Knight. And today, I will be reviewing The Legend of the Red Dragon, a.k.a. The New Legend of Shaolin, a.k.a. Once Upon a Time in China 4. Quick question. I know that in the martial art movie world, the kung fu movie world, it is common for something like this to happen, where the title of the movie is something in the original place where the movie was made, but then it gets changed over a few times depending on the market it's being released into, and sometimes the title gets changed to try and capitalize off of the popularity of something else. This happened a lot with Bruce Lee's movies as they were coming over here to the United States. Every Bruce Lee movie except for Enter the Dragon except for Enter the Dragon, and I don't know if Game of Death and Game of Death 2 have alternate titles, but most of his movies have secondary titles. They were the ones that were released here in the United States after the popularity of Enter the Dragon and his death. For example, Way of the Dragon came out in the US after Enter the Dragon, so that movie went by Return of the Dragon. Does this happen with other movies as well? Because the only one I'm really familiar with, other genres of movies, I should say, because the only one I'm familiar with is back when Captain America, the First Avenger came out. It was released in the UK with a different subtitle. I forgot what it was, but they removed the reference to the First Avenger because in the UK, there was a really popular television series in the 60s called The Avengers that had nothing to do with Marvel whatsoever, but it had great fight choreography, so we might talk about it at some point here on the show. So they changed that subtitle. Does this happen with other genres of films? Because it only gets more complicated from here, because according to Wikipedia and IMDb, this movie is The New Legend of Shaolin. But when I looked that up on Just Watch, which is the website I use to figure out where movies are streaming at, and when I pulled this movie up on Pluto TV, where I watched it at, it's Legend of the Red Dragon, which is the UK title. So how about this? If you're utterly confused at this point, as we are 3 minutes into this episode, if you're utterly confused with what movie I'm even talking about, let's go with this. Today, I'm going to be reviewing a movie that came out on March 3rd, 1994, starring Jet Li. How about that? We'll go with that, because obviously I cannot sit here and continue to go round and round over titles of films, because as you all know who have been here for a while, here on KungFuPizzaPrty, I seek to deliver high-flying action in 30 minutes or less and serve up some wisdom one slice at a time. So we got to keep going. When it comes to Jet Li, no disrespect to him or to his fan base, I have seen very few Jet Li movies. I had never seen this movie. This is actually our first Jet Li movie here on KungFuPizzaPrty, and there's a good chance that I'm going to hit a lot of his other movies before I get to the really obvious one of Hero. But the reason why Jet Li has never really caught my attention as much is because at the height of his popularity here in the US, I was a small child, and he was not making movies that were suitable or would hold the attention of a small child. It was very different with Jackie Chan, because Jackie Chan, I've talked about before how I grew up there in the late 90s, early 2000s, just watching every Jackie Chan movie I could get my hands on. So Rumble in the Bronx, Mr. Nice Guy, Operation Condor, just anything, Jackie Chan's First Strike, anything I could get my hands on. But the difference between Jackie Chan's popularity there in the 90s and the early 2000s versus Jet Li is that Jackie Chan was always making movies that were action films that were family friendly still. Yes, he has movies like The Spy Next Door and The Tuxedo, movies that were very clearly made for they were pretty safe films for families, kids to watch. Jet Li, on the other hand, look, Hero is an artistic cinematic masterpiece that this guy at the age of 5 was not going to sit through. Maybe there are more cultured children out there than I was at the age of 5, but there's no way I was going to sit through Hero. And a lot of his American films, thinking of examples like Romeo Must Die, Kiss of the Dragon, Meltdown, films like that, again, maybe there were kids whose parents were super chill with them watching that. Mine were not. I saw like bits. I have seen the ending of Kiss of the Dragon and Romeo Must Die 100 times over because I've seen parts of it on TV. Still to this day, I have not seen those movies from start to finish. So no disrespect to Jet Li and to his fan base whatsoever. I just missed a lot of that, and I think a lot of it comes down to my age during the height of his popularity here in the U.S. I definitely respect the guy for those of you who maybe have not spent a lot of time in the world of Jet Li. Obviously, his two big things are, especially in his more classical kung fu movies, not so much like his American-made films, but his more Hong Kong-based movies, is that they feature wire work, and the unique thing that he brought to the table compared to all of his contemporaries and people who have come before him and have gone on after him, though he is still alive and making movies, is that obviously Jet Li brings weapons to the table. That was always his big thing. And you get both here in Legend of the Red Dragon. You get some wire work. It's not overdone, but you do get some wire work. And he is whipping around a spear, a giant spear that continues to get bigger all throughout this movie. The only exception when it comes to Jet Li's film work, for me, that is, of like, this was my gateway. This was my introduction, my full introduction to Jet Li, is that in the year of our Lord 2008, all of my friends spoiled every little last detail of X-Men X-Men The Last Stand, which at the time was the big superhero franchise movie ending event. Does it definitely fail in comparison to Endgame? Absolutely. But that was the big deal, and they ruined the whole movie for me. And it was interesting. My dad had a very interesting response to that, because after that happened and he saw how like it upset me, I didn't make like a big deal, like tantrum about it, but it clearly upset me. He made this promise that he would take me, the next 2 movies I wanted to see in theaters, he would take me opening weekend. And one of those 2 movies was Jet Li's Fearless. And so that was my full proper introduction to the work of Jet Li. The other one, for those of you who are curious, was Superman Returns. Not worth writing home about. So who should go out of their way to watch Legend of the Red Dragon? Well, obviously, if you are a Jet Li fan and you have yet to see this movie is definitely for you, especially if you are more into his Hong Kong wire work, weapons style action film. I would also say if you like your kung fu movies with a side of comedy, this movie is also for you. At first, having no knowledge at all about what this movie was, what was going on in it, anything like that. When the movie first gets going, some things happened, and I was like, I can't tell if this is funny because it's just dated and aged poorly now, or if this is actually a comedy. But as the movie goes on, it is clearly an action comedy. There is goofy lines, goofy actions all throughout this movie. This line that I opened the show with, this very serious, dark line, which the movie does open very seriously, very dark. Jet Li returns to his Shaolin village to find everybody but his baby child dead. The government has come through and wiped out this village. The army has wiped out this village. His best friend betrays him, and he even gives his 18-month-old son the option. He puts a sword in the ground, and his child's favorite rocking horse and tells his kid, look, this 18-month-old, by the way, which I have a almost 3-year-old, so I know this was a comedic spot. But he tells his 18-month-old son, look, you can choose. If you pick the sword, you will go with me and we will exact vengeance. If you pick your toy, I will send you to your mother in heaven. That is basically the line. And it's after this point, the son chooses, the 18-month-old crawls his way to the sword. It's like all those reels you see where like at a certain like at 18-month-old or whatever, when the kid starts crawling, parents will put out the 3 OG starter Pokemon and the kid like crawls to one to choose its like starter. It was like that. It is after this point when the story starts proper with Jet Li and his son, who is now about 8 years old, I would say. If there was a clear indication of the time jump, I must have missed it. But I would say the kid is like 7, 8, 9 years old, 10 at most now. And it's from this point on that you realize, oh, this movie is actually a comedy, especially when you're introduced to this guy that that Jet Li is hired by to be his bodyguard. This is just like a selfish dude who wants everything and wants Jet Li to really be like a mercenary enforcer for him, to take care of all of the, steal stuff for him. And then we're introduced to this woman who the rich guy wants to marry because her mom just died and she needs someone to take care of her, but in reality her mother is very much alive. These two are thieves who are just trying to come up with clever ruses to be able to steal and get ahead of everybody else, and Jet Li has to keep his tabs on her the whole time. There's plenty of comedic spots all throughout this. The hidden Shaolin temple has 5 students who are going to be the next 5 masters of Shaolin, and they tattoo a map on the back of each one. A map that is broken up 5 different ways between the backs of these 5 students, and these 5 kids are essentially the little rascals. Like they can do, and it's important to note that this movie did come out in 1994, which is when the Little Rascals movie also comes out. I don't know if they were influenced by that, but they are basically acting like the Little Rascals throughout this movie. They can do kung fu, they have good kung fu, but they also are acting like the Little Rascals. Another group of people out there who may really enjoy this film are, of course, those of you who are extremely nostalgic for the 90s. You miss the 90s. And I get it. Like I said, I was a little kid during the 90s. I did not really grow up during the 90s. I was born in 94, not 89, So I have a different kind of nostalgia for the 90s than like someone who truly grew up through it. But hey, if you want that movie that has that like grainy film quality that almost makes you wonder if your eyesight is going because it's like kind of blurry and you wish the picture would get a little clearer, or especially if you are looking for one of those 90s movies that has like this happens a lot in the 90s, still to this day, children's shows are being made as a way to sell toys. I know that for a fact. I've got a 3-year-old watching Rubble and Crew right now. But a lot of times in the 90s, they also were, if they weren't trying to sell toys, they are also trying to capitalize on the video game craze that was going on. And there are some moments in this movie that are like, okay, yeah, you're trying to appeal to the video game audience. The opening fight sequence between Jet Li and his friend that has betrayed him feels very, and like all of these like government soldiers, army soldiers who have showed up to kill Jet Li, like this fight feels very like 90s video game fighter game kind of quality. Or so this guy Jet Li kills him, but witches resurrect him and make him invincible. And not only is he now this like, he's not a Jiangxi, but basically like this kind of a little bit of that, a little bit of zombie-like person now. Not only that, but he's riding around in a shiny steel chariot thing that looks more like a car than it does a like chariot. Like it completely encloses him. And he's riding it around, busting through walls throughout the movie, trying to find Jet Li to kill him. And again, that just feels very like video game-esque to me. And then, of course, the government's military soldiers, at one point, of course, they form a ball with their shields and go flying through a crowd. 2 balls, actually, flying through a crowd, almost like a giant Beyblade. And it's something about that, again, was like, there's something so, like, 90s video game about this. Even the, like, before the movie even starts, when it shows you the, you know, production company's logo with music playing in the background, I was, like, kind of finishing getting my dinner ready, and I looked over at the screen, and I was like, this sounds like the start to a PlayStation game. And it kind of follows through on that a little bit of like, there's so many like video game-esqueness about Legend of the Red Dragon. So if any of those kind of like things appeal to you at all, you know, if that's what you're looking for in a movie, trust me, you're gonna like it. It is kind of weird. The movie is kind of weird, and that's okay. It's okay that the movie is kind of weird. That's not a knock. I'll give you an example of a really weird scene. So once we know that this woman and her mother are trying to like woo this rich guy so that way they can steal from him, they come up with this plan where they are going to drug Jet Li with tranquilizer so that way, because of course his kung fu is so good that like he is foiling every plan that they have. So his kung fu is so good. Yeah. So they're gonna tranquilize him so that way he stays asleep so they can go steal this necklace that they want from the rich guy. It doesn't work. Instead, the mother accidentally swallows the tranquilizer, but it's not actually a tranquilizer, it's an aphrodisiac. And so the next, 10 minutes of the movie, you just have to hear this woman repeatedly say, God, I'm so horny. Just like over and over and over again. I'm so horny. And then finally, Jet Li foils their plot completely to try and steal this necklace from the rich guy. But the mom goes back and has some shaboinging with the rich guy. You don't see anything of it. You just hear them going, you know, it's that over the top, like grunting, panting. You see like the bed and it's got like a privacy curtain around it. And it's just like basically jumping up and down off the floor. It's just like, it's weird. It's just a little bit weird. There's so much going on here in a movie that is only an hour and 27 minutes long. There is so much going on here, but it's not a cluster. It's not like, oh my gosh, this movie is dumb and beneath me. Like, it is so fun. I had so much fun watching this movie. It is also worth mentioning some of the influences that this movie had. Like I said, this movie opens with Jet Li in this fight with this guy who sold him out. By the way, that baby, Jet Li's baby, the baby has already decided to stay with his dad and to exact vengeance. By the way, that baby during that whole fight sequence, which was the best fight sequence of the whole movie, by the way, that's not a dig on the rest. There's so many fight sequences throughout this movie, but this opening one is like, oh yeah, this is like the good Jet Li stuff right off the bat. That baby is strapped to Jet Li's back, which in of itself may be comical. It is kind of comical to see him like he even is like kind of whipping the baby around a little bit. For those of you, again, of a certain age, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the opening of Kung Pao Enter the Fist when the Chosen One is still a baby. It was like a little bit of that kind of like cheesiness. But all cheesiness aside, it is actually supposed to be a parody and an homage to one of the greatest Japanese sword film franchises of all time, Lone Wolf and Cub, which obviously we'll get to at some point here. Ooh, checks clock, sees he's at the 20 minutes mark, makes note. So there's that. And even as the story goes on, as Jet Li and his son, who is very stoic and has great kung fu, and they have fight sequences together, and sometimes those fight sequences involve the son standing on top of Jet Li's head while they're using their spears at the bad guys. As the story goes on, it has other moments that is supposed to be referencing to the Lone Wolf and Cub film series. But this movie also serves another big influence that this movie has, is that it's actually kind of a work of historical fiction. You see, Jet Li isn't just playing some random guy. He's actually playing a historical person. He is portraying Hung He Quan, Master Quan. Master Quan was a real rebel during the Qing dynasty. And historically / mythologically, because it's martial art history, I think I've talked about it a little bit before here on the show. Martial art history gets a little fuzzy sometimes as to what's historical, what's stories we have been telling for centuries that we may not know, and also, of course, white guys who are just making stuff up because they want to sell books. There's also that category. But Master Huan was, during the Qing dynasty, he was this rebel in southern China who is also credited with being the father of southern China Shaolin Kung Fu. So this movie itself, though, isn't like a biopic or anything like that. He is playing a historical character in a movie that is otherwise a work of fiction. But I still thought that was a pretty interesting tidbit. And again, didn't really know that going into this movie. Why did I pick this one? I just wanted to watch a Jet Li movie. When it comes right down to it, I just wanted to watch a Jet Li movie. And it's March, and this movie came out 31 years ago, and I'm turning 31 later this month. So, I was like, yeah, we're just going to tie all these threads together. So, would I watch Legend of the Red Dragon again? Absolutely. Absolutely. This movie was so fun. I enjoyed all 90 minutes of it. I will say, if there was one critique, even though it's an hour and 30 minutes long, it is a bit long. There is like a little part that kind of drags a little bit, and which is weird to say because this movie is nothing but fight sequence into fight sequence into fight sequence into fight sequence. So you're never bored. You're never like at a loss for fight sequences when it comes to this movie. And again, if you're into the wire work, if you're into Jet Li whipping around really long spears, that's his go-to in this one. He's got a really long spear that he goes to. The mother that I was talking about of the woman, the like thief duo, she's a dart expert, so she's whipping around darts and catching them. You get a good roundedness when it comes to the fighting, but it was like a tad bit long. That's like my only critique, but I would absolutely watch this movie again. Would I buy it? I kind of want to buy copies of this movie under all three titles now. Just circling back, coming full circle back to that whole ridiculous thing I started this show off with when it comes to titles of martial art movies. Like, I kind of wouldn't mind like getting all three titles of this movie, but I think I would. I think if I could come across like I feel like I come back to this a lot because I'm like, I like physical media. I have always been into physical media. I've been buying CDs, records, DVDs, Blu-rays before it was like really cool again. Like I kind of came into the record collecting post the hipster pop of buying records, but I feel like everybody's really into physical media again now because everyone's so disillusioned by both cable and also streaming at this point. So there is, but I'm also like a minimalist at heart. There's something, I like the simplicity. I admire the simplicity of the minimalist lifestyle. Some people are a little crazy, but I do find something very spiritual about the minimalist lifestyle in its approach. So even though I do like having physical media, I do find myself here on this show keep coming back to this whole, I would buy it if it was in like a DVD collection. And I would, if I could find like a Jet Li DVD Blu-ray collection and it had this in it, I would probably, it would motivate me to buy the whole pack. But I think that's it for today's episode. Let's go ahead and start wrapping this up comfortably. Thank you for listening, everybody. If you haven't yet already, please make sure you rate and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. Pass this episode along to a friend. Follow the show on Instagram at KungFuPizzaPrty and on Letterboxd, KungFuPizzaPrty, and check out Studio 219, our YouTube channel that features faith and pop culture content. A lot of good things going on over there, so subscribe over there if you haven't yet already. You can find links to all of those in the description of this episode, and check out the rest of the great shows here on the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network, AMP for short, including Systematic Ecology, Why I Don't Like, and my sister show, My Seminary Life. Thank you again for listening. This has been Kung Fu Pizza Party, where I've delivered high-flying action in 30 minutes or less and served up some wisdom, one slice at a time.